Well, 2 days later, I got to say, I don't think any of the shine has come off of that Backyard Brawl victory. You all know what happened. You all know how it went down. We talked about it a lot after the game on Saturday night on the post-game show. If you haven't checked that out, you can see it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But there's still things to talk about because even though it's 2 days later, depending on when you watch this video, I guess the game ended around 7 or 7:30 or sometime. So I assume you're not waiting until the evening to watch, although some people do watch the videos in the evening. So maybe it is 48 hours later. But effectively 2 days later, I got to think you're still pretty jazzed, as they would say, about this win. Coming back from being 10 down with 5 minutes left to go. You've seen all the stats. David Hale from ESPN keeps tweeting out stats all weekend. He was tweeting out stats about how really rare it is for teams to come back from being down by double digits in the fourth quarter like Pitt has in the last 2 weeks. That, hardly any other teams have done it in the country this year. Pitt has very rarely done it over their recent history. And here they've done it 2 weeks in a row. And it's still remarkable to think about. And I thought, okay, Monday podcast, Monday morning Pitt, we're going to, we'll start moving forward, right? We're not going to dwell anymore on the Backyard Brawl and what that game meant. We're going to start moving forward. What can they do take into this next week and the rest of the season? What does it all mean? But the reality is they're playing Youngstown State this week, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Penguins, and we'll talk about what Pitt should do this week, like not play Desmond Reed. And we'll talk about that stuff throughout the week. But today, I think we got to flash back on the Brawl just a little bit more. I don't think you're ready to move on from it. I know I'm not ready to move on from it. And let's be honest, like in terms of Pittsburgh sports talk, what are you going to get today? Are you going to get Backyard Brawl, another incredible fourth quarter comeback from Pitt, a rising star on the local sports scene in Eli Holstein, or are you going to get the Steelers scored a touchdown? Throw a parade for that. And I don't mean to throw shade. Look, you got to talk about what the people are interested in, and I think probably the majority of the population in Pittsburgh is interested in the Steelers, but you and we've got other things to talk about. Like coming back from being down 34-24 in the final 5 minutes, an epic 2 touchdown drives, following, coming back from being down 3 touchdowns in the final 20 minutes a week ago. This Pitt team's got a little something going for it. And there's some things, some question marks that continue to be an issue with this team, but they've got some things working. So let's talk about what's working for this team right now. Let's talk about some other stats and other sort of, thoughts that we've come up with after, reflecting for the last 2 days about that win. Let's revisit the Brawl again and talk about what we make out of that game here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday morning. It's the Morning Pit. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and your Pitt Panthers are 3-0. That's not a bad thing to wake up to today. Pitt is 3-0 for the first time since 2020. Got a real chance to go 4-0 for the first time since 2000. That's it. There was no more numbers to add at the end of that. I think 2000 was the last time they started a season 4-0. They've got a chance to post an undefeated non-conference record for the first time since joining a conference. There's a lot going on with this team right now, and they have positioned themselves for a pretty nice season. They've already matched last season's win total, so they've got that going for them, which is nice. But more, like I say, we'll talk more big picture stuff as the week goes on, as we, move through this week, head toward that Youngstown State game. Obviously on the Wednesday night live show with me and Jim, we will be talking about, kind of what it all means in the big picture. But today I got more Brawl thoughts and more thoughts about Eli Holstein, more thoughts about this defense, more thoughts about some playmakers who have emerged, and some of the most memorable moments from that game. What's really going to stick with you a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you think back on the 2024 edition of the Backyard Brawl, the 107th Backyard Brawl? What are you going to think about? What are you going to remember? So I think we already know some of the main plays, but I think there's some other things to talk about. Some heroes, some unsung heroes, some sung heroes. A lot of guys stepped up and made plays to help Pitt get that win. I need you to step up and like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content, like these daily morning Pitt videos, our weekly live show, like I mentioned, we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 with me and Jim Hammett, hanging out with you, talking a little Pitt sports. or the post-game shows, which are the most fun thing we do all week, I think. Really look forward to those. We had a lot of fun on Saturday night after the game, talked for about an hour and a half. You can find that video here. The podcast is out there as well, so you can, there's plenty of ways to consume that and go check it out. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people hanging out. I think at one point we had about 500 people on the live stream. Everybody commenting and chatting, posting comments and questions. Having that interaction is always a lot of fun. It's always more fun to do it after a win, but we also sometimes get even more traffic after a loss. That's just kind of how that goes sometimes. But we have a good time with it, and we'd love to have you join us for our next post-game show after the Youngstown State game on Saturday. Don't know what time we'll be doing that yet. I haven't scheduled that thing out, but we'll look ahead and see what the schedule looks like. But we all, we hang out, we drink, and we talk about Pitt football. What more could you ask for, right? Now, if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our live streams, the post-game show or the weekly show, the Wednesday night show, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and turn on notifications. You do that, you'll get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live, and then you won't miss anything we do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Everything you need to know about Pitt sports is right there at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So there was this thought that I was having about this team yesterday. Obviously, like you, I spent a lot of the time yesterday thinking about the Backyard Brawl, thinking about the game on Saturday night, and thinking about, what do we think about this team? We know they're 3-0. Right? We know they are producing offense at a very high level. I think they're third in the ACC in scoring offense, top 5 or top 6 in total offense, top 5 or top 6 in passing offense. They've got one of the most productive passing games in the country, one of the most productive offenses in the country. And obviously they've leaned on that offense to get them, to get some of these comeback wins, and leaned on the defense as well. As we talk about, you come back from being down 21 at Cincinnati, you score touchdowns on 3 consecutive drives, and then a field goal. Something has to happen in between those drives, right? Like you can't just go out and score and not think about what the defense is doing. The defense gets a whole bunch of credit for, between the 2 touchdown drives on Saturday, pitching the 3 and out and getting the ball back to the offense. That, as much as anything, that's huge. That's a big part of it. We're obviously going to focus on the offense. We're always going to talk about the offense a lot, and they deserve credit. I mean, you drive 77 yards with 2 minutes to go, field goal to tie, touchdown to win, and you go down and you get the touchdown largely on the back of that guy, Eli Holstein. Not that guy, Brandon George. He did his own thing, so we'll talk about Brandon George in a second. But, largely with Eli Holstein carrying you down the field, I mean, that's going to get the headlines. But Pitt's defense stepped up. In both games in the fourth quarter, they stepped up and played well and made big plays. You can't ignore that. And let's see. Do I want to start with a specific about the defense or sort of an overall thought that I have? I'll start with the overall thought, okay? Because as I thought about this game a lot over the weekend, thought about this game a lot yesterday, there was one thing I kind of came back to. As I think about this team overall after 3 games, with everything we've seen, with everything we kind of knew going into it, with what we've seen, any new developments or surprises or pretty much things going as expected, I think there's a certain reality. I think there's a certain truth that, this team doesn't necessarily do anything great. They're not necessarily great at anything. It's not like you walk into the game and you're like, wow, you've got to find a way to stop this. Or, boy, you've got to find a way to handle this. Outside of maybe field goal kicking, where Ben Sauls now is, 6 of 6 on the season? He is. After he made a 31-yard kick on Saturday, he's now 6 of 6 on the season. They're really good at that. I would say they are great at that. But I don't think you really walk into games saying, well, you got to find a way to slow down their kicking game. They're not necessarily great at anything. Passing game has been pretty effective, and that's where they put up the bulk of their yards. But Eli Holstein's still holding the ball a little bit too long, and he's holding it too long for his pressure to hold up. Somebody made a point on the message boards yesterday talking about rewatching some Western Carolina football, and the ball comes out quick. The quarterback gets rid of the ball quickly. So the offensive line doesn't need to hold up as long as Eli Holstein was sort of tasking them with holding up on Saturday. Now, not all of it was they were being asked to block for 4 or 5 seconds. Sometimes they just blew the block, and Eli Holstein got sacked twice on the same drive, I think, where there was just protection breakdowns. But, I mean, for as good as their passing game has been, Holstein holds the ball a little bit. O-line still not doing a great job protecting him, right? Desmond Reed has been outstanding, and I think he's still, top 3 in the nation, tied for second in the nation in all-purpose yards per game. He had his quiet game on Saturday and still scored 2 touchdowns. So you look at it and you're like, wow, that was his quiet game. I guess he's still pretty good. But I think West Virginia showed a little bit of how he could be contained. Just by committing to stopping the run and how they defended Pitt's rushing attack overall. Not necessarily a reflection on Reed in particular, but on how West Virginia defended the Pitt's rushing attack. And so, yeah, Reed has been really good, but the running game pretty much got slowed down on Saturday. Defensively, you can look at, they have this or they have that, but the reality is they look suspect against the run. And as is the case always with Pat Narduzzi defenses, they'll give up long pass plays if the pressure doesn't get there. And the pressure still, it gets there sometimes, but it doesn't get there consistently enough for what this defensive scheme demands. And so, I think you look at them and you can find some positives, but you also say they're not necessarily great at anything other than kicking. The one thing they've been great at in the last 2 games, though, is coming back in the fourth quarter. And I'm not sure if that's it's quantifiable because we can look at the stats from the fourth quarter, and here I have charted every offensive play from the fourth quarter. Pretty remarkable over the last 2 games, what Eli Holstein has done in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games. 15 of 17, which is 88.2% completions. 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. If you put those numbers, 15 of 17 for 289 and 3 touchdowns with no picks, if you put those into an NFL passer rating calculator, it comes out to 158.3. The most random and bizarre perfect score in the history of scores, but that's what it is. For whatever reason, the NFL passer rating tops out at 158.3. So Eli Holstein in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games has been quite literally perfect. And then you add in his rushing, where he's rushed 7 times for 62 yards, and that includes sacks. Sorry, Eli, but those do count as rushing yards. So you add, 15 of 17 for 289, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 7 rushing attempts for 62 yards. Eli Holstein has been a monster in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games. And the rest of the guys on offense have been as well. Kanate Mumfield has been a monster in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games. Desmond Reed, particularly in the Cincinnati game. Gavin Bartholomew has had huge catches in each of the last 2 games in the fourth quarter on huge touchdown drives. The touchdown drive that got Pitt their second touchdown drive. Or no, I guess it would have been the third touchdown drive at Cincinnati. Bartholomew had a big catch to move the sticks. And then, the game-winning touchdown drive against West Virginia, he had a 17-yard catch to, again, move the sticks, get a new first down, and move the ball downfield. And so lots of guys have stepped up. Lots of guys have made big plays. But here's the one thing about that. That might be what they're great at. They're great at comebacks, and that's what they've done so far. They've been great at comebacks. Is that repeatable, though? Is that sustainable? You don't want to keep putting yourself in position where you are down double digits in the fourth quarter. I'm not entirely convinced that you'll be able to do that for another 8 or 9 games to come back from being down double digits in the fourth quarter. This team has to find a way to start faster. And not just their first drive, but they need to have more success in the first half so they don't find themselves in the position they've been in the last 2 weeks to be trailing by as much as they were. And there's a lot, and that goes on both sides of the ball. That Holstein has to start a little bit better, and I don't think he's been terrible in the first half of the last 2 games, but he needs to be better, more consistent. The plays are there to be made, the passes are there, the throws are there, and he's seeing them. He just needs to be a little bit quicker with it. He needs to trust his teammates, and that's something we talked about a lot last week. The players and coaches talked about it a lot last week, and it's going to come up again this week, and it'll be a topic until it's not a topic, which is to say until Holstein figures it out and kind of improves how he's doing in that regard. So I don't think you can keep relying on these fourth quarter comebacks. They've been exciting for sure. I think they've given everyone a little bit of extra heart palpitations over the last 2 weeks, and understandably so. It's been a lot of fun to watch, but you're going to have to find a way to start these games faster. You're going to have to find a way to not put yourself in a position where you're down by double digits, by 10 points with 5 minutes to go in this last game, by 21 points with 20 minutes to go in the Cincinnati game. And so you can't rely on that. I thought I had another point to make beyond that, but that's it. You can't rely on making those comebacks every week. A couple other things from that game, though, I did want to highlight and look at a few stats and things. I was looking at the defensive stats. Donovan McMillan, I think he had like 18 tackles against West Virginia last year. He got 13 in this game. Is what you would expect from that boundary safety position against a run-heavy team, and McMillan certainly stepped up and got it done. But what's interesting to me is when I look at the box score here, the next three leading tacklers, and actually one guy tied with McMillan for the team lead, game high, 13 tackles, was Kyle Lewis. And then right after him is Rasheem Biles with 12 tackles and Brandon George with 9. So those three linebackers put up 34 tackles in this game. And I think that's notable. I think that's remarkable. And I think that through 3 games, and I suspect this is something we will talk about again throughout this week, and we'll talk at length about it. I think through 3 games, the linebackers have been really good and getting better. I think they were better against West Virginia than they were against Cincinnati. I think they were better against Cincinnati than they were against Kent State. And I think they continue to trend up, particularly the outside guys, Lewis and Biles, but Brandon George as well. Brandon George did not come off the field on defense on Saturday. He played every defensive snap against West Virginia. He was out there on punt coverage, or punt return, as you could see, because he returned the blocked punt for a touchdown. Brandon George is having the best season of his career. Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles are blowing up right now. Biles with 12 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, just is a demon out there. Kyle Lewis is all over the place making plays, 13 tackles. He had the game-sealing interception, and is just all over the field, and just playing at a really high level. I think when you look for the really encouraging signs from this team, the guys who have really impressed and stepped up and stood out, those linebackers are ones that I'm circling right off the bat, because they played big. Rashad Battle came up with 2 pass breakups later, over the course of the game after having not a great start to the season, about what you might expect from a guy making his first year as a full-time starter, but he had 2 big pass breakups. In that game on Saturday. He had 1 tackle, but the pass breakups were really what made the biggest difference. I think Rylan Gandy's been fine. I think both of those guys have continued to progress and continued to get better since the start of the season. The safeties, I think we're still looking for them to make some splash plays, although Donovan McMillan had an interception in the Kent State game. Cruz Brookins had an interception in the West Virginia game. So, they're getting some of that. McMillan put up a ton of tackles. Javon McIntyre had 4 tackles. Brookins had 2 tackles, plus his pick. P.J. O'Brien had 3 tackles. I think they're doing their jobs, and I think they've been fine. I think you're looking for them to take the next step to be sort of spectacular. Not just solid, but spectacular, I think is what you're looking for out of those safeties. But I think, again, probably what we talked about a lot this offseason. You like the back 7. I think the back 7 is playing well and getting better. The front 4 is where you need to see improvement. I tell you who stands out to me is Sincere Edwards. I feel like he just looks like he's around the ball a lot. Francis Brew continues to get more snaps after getting into the lineup the last 2 weeks. I think he's going to keep playing more and will make an impact. Maybe those young guys will help give that unit the jump start that it needs, but still kind of waiting for that defensive line to come into its own. And then offensively, a few random things that stick out. I mean, Konate Mumfield is having his best year at Pitt, bar none, easily. 6 catches for 76 yards in Saturday's game. He had a 123-yard game last week. He's coming into his own. He's reaching the potential he showed at Akron 3 years ago, and he's becoming the player that he came to Pitt to be. He came to Pitt to be a productive, contributing member of the receiving corps, and he was productive and contributing the last 2 years, but their passing game was so god-awful that he wasn't really afforded the opportunity to do much. Well, now he's getting that opportunity. He's making plays. He's using his good route running and football IQ to get open, and then he's making the catches when the ball is thrown to him. Kenny Johnson, I think, continues to show flashes of being a spectacular player. Raphael Williams is going to break out. Sincere Lee is going to break out. And then Dejon Reynolds. And this is what I love about, and I talked about this on Saturday night. This is like what's beautiful about a game, just a regular game versus a rivalry game like the Backyard Brawl. Example, 2019, Pitt beat UCF at I guess it was Heinz Field at that point, right? Upset win. It was huge. The Pitt special game where Aaron Matthews threw a touchdown to Kenny Pickett, and I think that's remembered. I think it's remembered that Aaron Matthews threw that pass because that was such a unique play and in a big win and everything. But you might forget, like, Dontavius Butler-Jenkins caught a touchdown pass from Nick Patty in that game. And some of you are like, oh yeah, I remember that. Some of you are like, I've never heard of Butler-Jenkins at all. Who is that guy? And some of you were like, yeah, of course, everybody knows that play. But I think a vast majority it would jog your memory a little bit. I'm not saying Dejon Reynolds is Dontavius Butler-Jenkins, but I do not think his name will fade from memory like Butler-Jenkins has. Because Butler-Jenkins helped Pitt beat a ranked opponent at home. That's cool. They beat UCF. That's cool and all. But Dejon Reynolds made an incredible catch for a 40-yard touchdown on 2nd and 30 to help Pitt come back from being down 10 in the final 5 minutes. Like, Dejon Reynolds will live in infamy in the good way. Dejon Reynolds, his name will forever be associated with this rivalry for Pitt fans. Pitt fans will always remember Dejon Reynolds because of what he did in this game and because he did it against West Virginia. They'll remember that Derek Davis scored the go-ahead touchdown, just like they remember that Pat Bostic scored the game-winning touchdown against West Virginia in 2007. They'll remember that Derek Davis scored the game-winning touchdown. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will still invoke the names of Dejon Reynolds and Derek Davis because of the part they played in engineering this comeback. And that's what makes these rivalry games great. If this was a comeback against Wisconsin or Oklahoma State or Tennessee, or even like maybe even probably not Notre Dame, but like Tennessee, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, Iowa, any of these like power conference teams that Pitt has played over the past 10 years, if they went out there and they got a comeback win, boy, it'd be a great story. And boy, Dejon Reynolds gets his first target of the season and he catches it for a 40-yard touchdown to convert 2nd and 30. That's amazing. Derek Davis scores a game-winning touchdown, all this stuff. It'd be great. But after a year, 2 or 5 years or 10 years, the memories will fade. But the memories don't fade in the Backyard Brawl. Dejon Reynolds' name will ring out, as it should, because that was an incredible catch, an incredible play, and a huge play in what ended up being an epic comeback. So it's not one we're going to forget for a while, the game I'm talking about, or Reynolds' catch. I know I'm not going to forget it for a while. You're not going to forget it for a while. And I don't know if it'd be possible to have better momentum than Pitt has right now. Can't overlook any opponent. We know around here that an FCS opponent can beat a power conference opponent, and you certainly don't want to see that happen. So for the players and coaches, you got to take Youngstown State seriously and all of that. But the opportunity's there. The opportunity is there to turn a good start into an even better start to this 2024 season. I didn't think they would get out of the first 3 games at 3-0. I didn't. But here they are. And it's a credit to the players and the coaches for what they've been able to do in the fourth quarters of the last 2 games. Just maybe for the next couple of games, or at least for this week, they could get a faster start and not need a fourth quarter comeback. That would seem to be ideal. But we'll see what they do. We'll see how they approach it. We'll see who plays and all those things. We'll see if we can get a little bit of insight on that as the week proceeds or progresses. But for now, Pitt's 3-0. fresh off a comeback win against West Virginia in the Backyard Brawl. An epic game. A lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to talk about, and we did it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com with the Panther-Lair postgame show after the game. We had a lot of fun with that. I'd love to have you join us on this Saturday for the Youngstown State postgame show. And if you want to make sure you don't miss it, click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you always know when we go live right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video as we always ask you to do, and then check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. I'm guessing it went pretty well given what happened on Saturday night at Acrisure Stadium. So hopefully the rest of your weekend went just as well as that did. Hope your Monday goes well and you get the week off to a great start. We'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for more Pitt talk right here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.